Welcome to another one of my rants. Dr. Jester rants. Yeah. The CNN's Don Lemon Black Lives Matter movement is not about all Black Lives Matter. Turns out, he finally speaks the truth. It's not all about all Black lives. It's just about some Black Lives Matter. CNN Don Lemon said during an interview with actor Terry Crews on Monday that Black Lives Matter movement was not about all Black Lives Matter because the movement primarily focused on police brutality. The interview came in response to remarks the Crew has made on social media recently about the Black Lives Matter movement that has triggered the political left. The Black Lives Matter movement was started because it was talking about police brutality, Lemon said. If you want a now Black Lives Matter movement that talks about gun violence in communities, including, black communities, then start that movement with that name. But that's not what Black Lives Matter is about. It's not a now encompassing movement. So if you're talking about if someone started a movement that said cancer matters, Lemon continued, and then someone comes and says, why aren't you talking about HIV? It's not the same thing. You're talking about cancer. So the Black Lives Matter movement is about police brutality and injustice. In that manner, not about what's happening in black neighborhoods. Crews pushed back on Lemon's premise by noting that when you look at the organization, police brutality is not the only thing they are talking about. And here comes my rant. I had to read the entire thing here so I could compress it and release my rant. In this case, well, quite frankly, Don Lemon actually finally admits the truth, but as we all know, Don Lemon is a kind of an idiot. Terry Crews, on the other hand, was impeccable. I love that guy. Okay, now let's dissect a little bit the argument here. The Black Lives Matter movement, it's a noun-encompassing name. If you wanted to focus only on the police brutality against blacks, which is a tiny little minuscule according to statistics, and it's actually kind of even lower than the population level of blacks, then you should rename the movement to include that it should only be about police brutality against blacks. So, I don't know, police brutality against blacks or something like that. But instead, they created a name that alludes to all sorts of blacks, all sorts of people who are all subject to some sort of brutality or violence. That includes the black-on-black violence, which is absurd in the US. That's what Terry Crews is actually getting to at. He's pointing out the hypocrisy for them to actually only focus on certain violent acts against certain black people, which is not something that fits around the name. And quite frankly, I have to agree with Terry Crews, because he is correct. And he's actually, then later on, Don Lemon makes a weird comparison, saying that if someone started a movement that said cancer matters, then Lemon continued, and then someone comes and says, why aren't you talking about HIV? It's not the same thing. Well, if you make a name that says Black Lives Matter, then you are encompassing everything. You are including everything. If you wanted to focus only on one issue, you should have made a name that focused only on one issue. Now you are simply moving the goalposts, or as someone says, apples and oranges. Look, if you are going to make an analogy, then you shouldn't have said cancer matters. In that case, diseases matters. And then someone said HIV. What about HIV? Yeah, the person would be then correct because it's a disease. They are not doing proper comparisons. And then Ben Shapiro, Daily Wire editor emeritus and host of the Ben Shapiro Show, commented on the video from Newsbuster Nicholas Fondacaro by writing, so apparently we cannot point out that black lives taken by those who are not cops matter, even though those deaths are far more common, because it's all about the police brutality, but it's not. The BLM rubric has come to include everything from removing statues to reparations, and that's actually kind of true, because they are not actually focusing on the lives lost, no matter if it's against if it's by police brutality or if it's by another black or anyone else. They are not focusing on that. They are only focusing on one issue while saying and creating an analogy or I don't know, an entire name that says that everything, all blacks, all things, but they are not. That's the issue many people have. This is the transcript. I don't know if I'm gonna read everything because Don Lemon kind of fucking tires me. Mostly because his arguments are asinine. Well, actor Terry Crews said I wanted to bring up the fact that, there are very, very, militant types forces in Black Lives Matter. He's absolutely correct. Because a lot of people have died in these protests, and he's absolutely correct to point it out. There has been more lives lost since George Floyd has been killed than just the incidents against police, where the police had any brutality against blacks during all this time period. There have been, 20 people or more that have been killed or injured, severely injured because of this? Even one black guy David Dorn, if I'm not mistaken with the name, please someone correct me, who tried to defend a property and he got killed by other blacks. What the fuck is wrong with you people? And I was issuing a warning. It's one of those things where I have been part of different groups. I've been being a part of different things. You see how extremes can go far and go wild. And when you issue a warning, hey, a warning is seen as detrimental to the movement. How can you ever have checks and balances? In the 60s and 70s, airplanes went down all the time. And the reason they found out why they did was because the pilots could never be questioned. He's absolutely correct. When you have the leaders of the Black Lives Movement who are now talking, if we don't get our demand, we are going to burn it down. And he's actually correct in that too. They burned statues. They went even after an elk, thinking it was a pig. These people are fucking retarded. Or the black people who are talking about working with other whites and other races. If they are being viewed as sellouts or called, can't say that, you start to understand that you are now being controlled. You are not being treated as love. You are actually being controlled. Someone wants to control the narrative. I viewed it as a very, very dangerous self-righteous that was developing, that really viewed themselves as better. It was almost supremacist. Move where they viewed their Black Lives Matter a lot more than mine. He's absolutely correct. Terry Crews' lives matter as much as Don Lemon's lives matter, just as much as my life matters. All lives matter. Each and every single life matter. I think I agree with Sargon. Each life matters. Okay, so let me jump in here. There's a lot that you said. You think that Black Lives Matter is, you think it's an extreme movement. I agree, it is. No, this is the thing. It's a great mantra. It's the true mantra. Black lives do matter. He's right. But when you're talking about an organization, you're talking about the leaders. You're talking about the people who are responsible for putting this thing... responsible for putting these things together is two different things. And Cruz actually managed to separate both of them. The mantra, the message, Black Lives Matter, because it does matter, and BLM, the movement itself. I prefer to call it the message itself as Black Lives Matter because it's a wholesome message. It's a message that's important, and I don't think anyone will disagree with, except those actual racists. But those are very few and far between. So much so that there is a shortage of actual racists, and there are people creating them because there are shortages. Well, anyway, Cruz managed to separate them with BLM. BLM is the organization that everyone is against. The organization, not everyone, but you get my drift. It's the organization that we are against, because BLM turns out to be an extreme movement. It's a hate movement right now. They're targeting even blacks who disagrees with the BLM message, the organization itself. Okay, I got you. Terry, you realize that even during the civil rights movement, that Dr. King was seen as extreme. That movement was seen as extreme. To people who don't want to make change, movements are seen as extreme. You can't point them easily as extremes when they are not. This is very true, but also, when talking about MLK, you are talking about Nelson Mandela and even Malcolm X. They all realize that you have to have a non-racial component to these kind of movements. And there will be resentment, and there will be get back. One of these people will tend to inaudible. I don't want to move from one oppressor to the next. He's absolutely correct. Again, Terry Crews nails it like a professional. Who's the next oppressor? Who is the next oppressor? When I describe this, when you look at the city of Chicago, there are 9 children who have died by gun violence, by black-on-black gun violence, from the June 20th out the way to today. And you're talking about even with the Atlanta child murders, there are 28 kids who died in 2 years. You are talking about a month and you have 9 black kids, and the Black Lives Matter movement has said nothing about this kind of thing. He's absolutely correct, because they haven't said anything. The BLM organization haven't said anything about these lives. So they are, by their silence, is violence. Now I see it. I see it, their message, because their silence, it's practically giving it to and saying that these kids' lives don't matter at all. But does that have to do with equality, though, Terry? I don't understand that has to do with equality, because listen, there's crime, there are people in those communities, those people are just being nonchalant about, good God, Don Lemon, you're fucking insane. I lived in Chicago, there are many people who are working in those communities, try to get rid of gun violence, I can't even stand Don Lemon. Yeah. It's not that way. This is this. Then Cruz replies, it's not that way. This is the thing. Black people need to hold other black people accountable. I said the same thing. This is the Black America's version of Me Too movement. If anything is going to change, we ourselves need to look at our communities and look at each other. Once again, a wholesome message. I say this cannot go down. This is the thing too. There are a lot of great people there who are held hostage. Who are held hostage by people who literally are ruining these neighbors with violence. And then claiming that Black Lives Matter. When you look at the parents of these little kids who are mentioning, saying, hey man, why aren't they speaking up for me too? When I look at this whole thing about, it's about who is controlling the narrative, it's got to be all Black Lives Matter. And what's happening is that because I even challenged it, because I even questioned or warned people, he became a target. Then Don Lennon replies to him, because, oh Jesus Christ, this guy is obnoxious and stupid. And then he talks about the cancer and HIV. I'm not going to go throughout his replies. It's just, it makes me go insane. Just reading what he's saying, it's kind of gives me like that pulsating headache, like it's like the guy is he has a complete disconnect from reality. When you look at the organization, Cruz replies, but when you look at the organization, police brutality is not the only thing they are talking about. And he's correct. Then again, Lemon interrupts and says, I know that, but I agree that it's not even going to matter. So, same as white, 80% of them are killed by white people because of proximity. It's the same thing with black people. It happens every single day. But, listen, then Cruz replies, listen, I understand what you're saying. I totally understand. It's about police brutality. That should never be accepted. I agree. It should never be accepted. I'm not saying that that's not it, but there's more there. And when I look, if they have more on their agenda, we need to ask them about what else is on the agenda other than police brutality. And that's all I'm doing. Questioning, warning, watching. And if that bothers you now, that bothers me. And Don Lemon replies, I'm over, Terry. See, he got debunked. He got pwned by Terry, and now he runs. We are equal. See, Cruz has the correct message. We are equal, and I should be able to say something truthful. He's absolutely correct. He's equal, and he should be able to say something truthful. Like everyone else is. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Terry Crews. He's fucking awesome. I don't think there's anything else to say. Terry Crews already covered everything, and I already said everything I had in the beginning of this video, and quite frankly, if you want to know more, go and check what Terry Crews is writing. He's on his Twitter. You should go to Parler. Parler too, actually. You can have both. And it's actually kind of amazing, really. He's really good. Yeah, you should check it out. So this is it for today. Good night. Take care. Bye-bye.